These niggas, bro, they won't stop.
That shit talking about a monkeypox vaccine. The same motherfuckers that made the Moderna shit.
Yeah.
Like, these niggas gonna fall for that shit twice.
Of course.
It's live up.
Them niggas still dropping dead from the fucking vaccine.
Yeah, first yeah.
Tell them on the last time.
All right, the water. Hey, all right, we back.
Every medicine that is on the shelf, before it hit the shelf, it took 7 years. Hey, yeah, the lady's sick. Yeah.
It's work. You good?
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go back to First Maccabees, the first chapter. And we're going to start again at the first verse.
First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Shittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece.
And that was again the beginning of the Edomite rulership, all right, through Alexander the Greek, as he's known, but we know he's a Macedonian. All right, you got it.
And made many wars and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth, and took spoils of many nations, and so much that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive.
And you have to keep in mind that while he's doing this, he's also pushing that Greek philosophy. So the whole time, even with the other generals, they're still pushing Greek philosophy, even though they're fighting amongst each other. That's why when you go into Egypt with Ptolemy, you have what? Serapis Christus. He was mixing Egyptian gods with the Greek gods. So they were always pushing Greek philosophy. And that's why when you fast forward to the world that Yahweh had entered into, you had three main philosophies amongst our people. You had the ones that was hardcore zealous for the law. You had the ones that wanted to kill to get out of the captivity. All right, and then you had the ones that wanted to join with the heathens. Just like now, you got Jake that's militant. You got the hopeful elect that's coming back to the Lord, and then you got the ones that uncleave to the heathens, and they just want to play the game. You have those three philosophies. Now, in the ancient world, when Yahushua was in the earth, you had the same thing. You had the zealots. All right, that's why 70 AD wasn't something that happened overnight. It happened because there were revolts. You deal with the revolts that our people were doing. They were literally killing Roman soldiers in the middle of the markets. When you deal with the Sicarii, that was just one of many zealots.
Right.
There were many groups that was like, look, let's fight our way out of this.
Yeah.
And you got to think, they were fresh off of the Maccabees. They were fresh off of that time where they were reading the accounts of the Maccabees running through a troop. So they thought that maybe we could pull it off too.
Yeah. You had the guys. You had some called the Herodians. They was Jake that was doing that. Then when you read in Acts 5, this guy, what's this guy's name? Dudius, right? Yeah, in Acts 5 you had Dudius.
Right.
It said Dudius in like 400 rose up. They was from the Maccabees.
Right.
Right.
You had multiple revolts, and it wasn't just the Sicarii. They're like the most notable ones. An example is Judas Iscariot.
Yeah, in Acts 5, it mentioned Dudius and Judas. They both were, because Miliel said, if these men be like them, They're gonna be overthrown too.
Yeah, I was talking about Judas, that was the disciple, with,
Okay.
the one that betrayed Yahushua.
Yeah, he was a zealot,
He was
yeah.
amongst the zealots.
Yeah.
Because you had these competing ideas. You had the ones who joined to the heathens, like the wicked scribes and Pharisees. They had already made deals with the Romans. So they was like, look, let's just keep it kosher.
Right.
I got a cushy job. We don't want to get into it with them. Then you had the zealots that wanted to overthrow the Romans. That's why 70 AD happened, because at that time, Rome looked at it like, look, we just got to get rid of this shit. And that's why you had all of these different competing ideas. So when you get into the New Testament and you see these Gentiles, which breaks down to the word Hellenists in a lot of cases, that's just like saying we're trying to save our brethren out of being Americans, because that's what they identify as. In the ancient world, they identified themselves as Hellenists, meaning they were loyal to Greece. They considered themselves Greek.
So Alexander reigned 12 years.
If I can say this too, when you get into that word Helen, all right, that was the original name for Greece at that time. So
Yeah,
that's why
I
you
told
get
you.
into oh, you got it?
Yeah, come. So when you go into the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, and you go into Hellenists, it says Jews who made Greek their tongue, and with it often adopted the Greek ideas and practices. All right, because a Hellenist means that you advocate or you're for it. Like a racist, he advocates so he's for his race. Hellen, that means they were advocating for the Greek philosophy, because that was the new trend. That's like democracy right now. All other nations want to try democracy out because it's popular, because the Americans have pushed it. The West has pushed it. The same thing was happening only with Greece. That's why Christians today, they don't understand that those Gentiles are Israelites. They're just coming back. And that was the controversy. You had those who kept the law, who really descended from the Maccabees. That was like, look, we killed some of these niggas, man. Some of these niggas that's coming back, they family and them, if they'd have stayed in the land, we would have killed them. So now you have this controversy between the family. The ones that are trying to come back, but the ones that kept the law that are saying, look, they can't come back. You got it, Doc.
So Alexander reigned 12 years, then died, and his servants bare rule everyone in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, so did their sons after them many years. And evils were multiplied in the earth. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 130th year, in 7th year of the kingdom of the Greeks.
Because you got to remember, after Alexander died, his kingdom got parted by his 4 generals. Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and what's the last one? Seleucus. And Antiochus came out of who? Seleucid, the Seleucid Empire. So while they're having these wars amongst each other, they're still pushing Greek philosophy everywhere they've been scattered. Every region they in, they still pushing that Greek philosophy.
Right.
Seleucid went down hard on our people. This is how our people became Greeks, because he pushed it through death by the force of the sword. You got it.
In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein, that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief. Slack you.
So again, it says that they made themselves uncircumcised, right? Now, when we go to Ephesians, the 2nd chapter, all right, it says this. Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 11, wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands, that at that time you were without Hamashiach, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without power in the world. So this is why they're being called uncircumcision. This is the family saying, look, them niggas can't come home. we done had literal wars with them. The Maccabees, they ran through niggas, man. They would run through, and Jake ran to the other heathens for help. Because at that point, Maccabees was running through, and they was like, oh yeah, that's one of them niggas that made the deal. Get him.
Right.
And enough of them niggas got put to death that the other ones who wanted to keep them customs, they ran them off, man. Matter of fact, could you read that one more time, Mark?
And made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief.
Hey, I'm watching. Could you get First Maccabees 2 and 42? So now you're seeing our people become Gentiles in the New Testament. It was by the force of the sword, and then some of them were making deals. Some of them, they went willing. No? You got it, Robert. I'm watching.
2 and 32.
2 and 42.
2 and 42. This is First Maccabees chapter 2 and 42. Then came there unto him a company of Assyrians, who are mighty men of Israel, even all such as were voluntarily devoted unto the law. Also all they that fled for persecution joined themselves unto them, and were a stay unto them. So they joined their forces and smote sinful men in their anger, and wicked men in their wrath. But the rest fled to the heathens for secure.
Which is help. So they saw the Maccabees go through neighborhoods, pull niggas out their house and put their ass to death, and they was like, man, I'm packing up my bags and I'm going where I can keep the customs of the Grecians in peace. So they fled to the heathens.
Right.
So when you get to the New Testament, what you notice is that it's our people, man.
Right.
The ones who had left the customs. You got it, Rob.
So back in 1 Maccabees 1 and 16, now when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have the dominion of 2 realms. Wherefore he entered into Egypt with a great multitude, with chariots and elephants and horsemen and a great navy, and made war against Ptolemy, king of Egypt. But Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded to death. Thus they got the strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils thereof. And after that Antiochus had smitten Egypt, he returned again in the 143rd year, and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, and entered proudly into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar, and the candlestick of light, and all the vessels thereof, and the table of the showbread, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, and the censers of gold, and the veil, and the crowns, and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off.
Now jump down to 38.
Verse 38, insomuch that the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them, whereupon the city was made an habitation of strangers, and became strange to those that were born in her, and her own children left her. Her sanctuary was laid waste like a wilderness, her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into reproach, her honor into contempt. As had been her glory, so was her dishonor increased, and her excellency was turned into mourning.
Now that's a very poetic way to say that our people got conquered. And what Antiochus did was he made these decrees that by the penalty of death, you couldn't keep our customs. The next generation after that, it became normal. And before you knew it, you had this population of Israelites who cleaved to the Greek way of life. Just like Jake now, they cleave to being American. So when you fast forward into the New Testament, we're not talking about other nations being saved. We're talking about the same olive tree that's wild at this point coming back home. That was the controversy. If you were to put yourself back in that time, the ones who were debating, the apostles and then the Pharisees, they weren't debating that other nations could make it.
Right.
These conversations were about our family that were outcasted. Can they come in? How can they come in? What laws should they keep? Which ones should they? This was the debate. It was never about other nations. It was always about this family issue that we have it. Where these Israelites who ran off into these other nations are now trying to come back home. Should we give them access? They don't have their records. They can't prove that they can be in the temple. Because when you go into how our temple is set up, Heathens can't go into the temple. They can go to the outer court.
Right.
Our women can get further into the temple than the other nations.
Right.
There's a court of women. When you look at how the temple was, how it was set up, you had the court of women and then you had the court of men. And the women couldn't get into that portion.
Right.
But Israelite women could get into a certain portion of the temple that other nations couldn't get in at all.
Right.
So when you talk about the New Testament, these aren't men talking about letting other nations into the temple. Because that would have been a war, that would have been fighting words. They were already killing about the customs. Letting a heathen come into the actual temple, nah. The scriptures forbade that. So when you understand in context what's happening and you find out what happened with Hellenization, you understand that those Gentiles are our people that were in that Gentile state of mind. That's why when you get that word for Gentile and it breaks down to Hellenists, all right, it's not talking about no other nation. He ain't sending no letter to the Moabites. He was sending them to the Israelites that were in these different lands. During the Greco-Roman Empire.
Right.
Where the Greek Empire had diminished and Rome kept those same customs and graduated them, elevated them.
Nah, you know what I'm finna get, but I was just
Come on, no, get it.
Hey, get Acts 11:16. We're gonna get Acts 11:28. Start at 16, we're gonna read down to 20. What we got? No, you got it? What you got?
I got it. This is Acts chapter 11 and 16. Then remembered I the word of the Lord, how that he said, John indeed baptized with water, but ye shall be baptized with the Holy Spirit.
Go ahead.
For as much then as power gave them the like gift as he did unto us,
Right.
who believed on the Lord, Hamashiach Yahushai, what was I that I could withstand power?
Right.
When they heard these things, they held their peace and glorified power, saying, then hath power also to the Gentiles granted repentance unto life.
Right. So it said the Lord granted repentance unto the Gentiles. Keep reading.
Now they which were scattered abroad upon the persecution that arose upon Stephen traveled as far as Phoenice and Cyprus and Antioch.
I said that was scattered upon persecution. That was scattered. Go ahead.
Slack. Preaching the word to none but unto the Jews only.
I just said granted repentance to the Gentiles. Then it said none to the Jews only. Go ahead.
Verse 20. And some of them were men of Cyprus
Right.
and Cyrene,
Cyrene.
Slack, which when they were come to Antioch,
Right.
spake unto Grecians,
Right.
preaching the Lord Yahushai.
Now click on that word Grecian.
Beautiful.
Just get attachment. Hit it on it. Now what it gonna say is probably because of actually probably the phone, your battery down. Verse 20.
Acts 11 and verse 20.
We get the word Greece.
You got it?
So in this verse, it says, so in this verse, for that word Hellenist, right? That word Grecian, it say Hellenist, one who imitates the manner and customs or the worship of the Greeks and use the Greek tongue. This is the point. It say used in the New Testament of the Jews born foreign lands, and speaking Greek. It say in the New Testament. right? It said in the New Testament, used in the New Testament of Jews born in foreign lands and speaking Greek. Now get the one, go to Acts 20 and 28.
Right.
It's to the point that it say used in the New Testament. So everybody in the New Testament, when it say Jew, neither Jew nor Greek, it's talking about Israelites, man. It's not talking about heathens. Get the one in Acts 20 and 28. Click on the word nation. So in Acts 20 and 28, it said again about the New Testament. Go to get it. Got it. Word nation. I'm sorry, Acts 10 to 28. Could be yours a lot. Oh, my bad. So that could be Acts 10 to 28. So in Acts 10 to 28, that word there for nation, you're gonna get it. Okay, so in Acts 10 and 28, that word there, it says, strong definition, right? When you click on this, you go to G5443. It says this. It says this. It say in the New Testament, all the persons descending from one of the 12 sons of the patriarch Jacob. In the New Testament, all the persons descending from one of the 12 sons of the patriarch Jacob. So anytime in the New Testament you see neither Jew nor Greek, or you see Gentile, it's talking about Israelites, man. It's talking about Israelites. That's what the scriptures say. You got it, bro.
This is John chapter 7 and verse 35. Then said the Jews among themselves, whither will he go that we shall not find him? Will he go unto the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? All right, because that was the controversy. All right, you had the Israelites that were keeping the customs, and you had the ones that were dispersed. And the ones that were dispersed, all right, the ones that were in the land, they looked down upon them, man. All right, they looked down upon them. And the same thing is happening now. The same thing is happening now. We're telling our people who we actually are, and they're resisting it. Yeah, to do what? To be Americans, to be black, to be whatever Esau has told them that they are, man. And the same thing is happening. Yeah, come on.
Back in verse, please.
Matter of fact, this is John chapter 11 and verse 49. And one of them named Caiaphas, being the high priest that same year, said unto them, ye know nothing at all, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not. And this spake he not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Yahushua should die for that nation, and not for that nation only, but that also he should gather together in one the children of Yahushua that were scattered abroad, man. Those are the Israelites that were scattered abroad. All right? And that's how you get our people becoming Gentiles. All right? Vocab Malone and all these different Christian apologists don't understand the context and the history of our scriptures, man. That there's a divide. You got it.
Now, get Daniel 12 and 10. They can't understand it, man. It's impossible. The Lord said it. It's impossible for heathens to understand our letters, man.
Right.
Hey, get our 2 Peter 3 and 16, man. You got some whatever you got? Yeah, whatever you got, brother. Go ahead and get it. Look at them next. Go ahead and get what you got. Hey, if the Lord ain't get this to the heathens, man, right? If you're not a servant of Yahushua, In Colossians 1 and 26, it says, even the mysteries that have been hid from ages have now been made manifest to his saints. Oh, you good. Good, huh? Leave him alone. Leave him alone. Yeah, go ahead. You got it.
So you deal with that scattering of our nation, you have to also keep in mind that the northern kingdom had went to a place called Assyria after Assyrian captivity. All right, and it's detailed in second Ezra, chapter 13 and verse 40. It says, those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmanassar the king of Assyria led away captive, and carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen, and go forth into a further country, where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river, for the Most High then shewed signs for them, and held still the flood till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Assyria. All right, so the 10 tribes, right, the northern kingdom, had already been scattered. All right, they already separated themselves. So when you deal with that scattering, you also have to keep in mind that the 10 tribes, the northern kingdom, were already on the other side of the earth. They went into Assyria, which is a miracle. All right, I just want to make that.
No, that was a beautiful point. Because again, the Lord said that we were going to be gathered from the four corners of the earth, man. That was prophesied, not other nations being included into the blessing. And what the New Testament is a fulfillment of the promise made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right, because at one point, it was unlawful for us to even call ourselves Israelites. Christian church don't tell you that. This is 2 Maccabees chapter 6, and I'll start at verse 4. For the temple was filled with riot and revelings by the Gentiles, who dallied with harlots, and had to do with women within the circuit of the holy places. So they were having sex with prostitutes in our temple, man. And besides that, brought in things that were not lawful. The altar also was filled with profane things, which the law forbiddeth. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days, or ancient fasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew.
Right.
It was literally illegal for you to call yourself an Israelite. It was illegal for you to keep your customs. And those people, those Israelites had children. And they followed in the suit of their parents.
Right.
That's why the controversy was never about other nations being included. It was always about how do we include our family members that have been gone astray?
Right.
How do they come back home?
Right.
I have sheep that are not of this fold. It wasn't talking about other nations. It was talking about our people that had left, like the Prodigal Son. Why did Yahweh Shai use the parable of the Prodigal Son? It was two sons from the same daddy.
Right.
Wasn't no damn foreigner. It was two sons from the same daddy. One of them went off to a far country. The other one stayed home.
And he didn't come out with a mixed seed either.
Nah.
With a mixed bloodline.
The ones who stayed home were the Pharisees, the Israelites that were in the land of Judea, who felt like they were somebody because they had the law and they kept it.
Right.
And they looked down upon their own brethren that had left it. They looked at them like traitors. The same way our people call a nigga Uncle Tom. That's how Gentile was being thrown around.
Sambo.
A Sambo, right.
Sambo.
Slakia, a Sambo. The same way our people do that. You what's another one? What's another term? Uncle Tomahawk.
Sellout.
Sellout. That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
A sellout. Gentile was being thrown around like that for our people. Nah, he ain't a real one.
Right.
He left.
You ain't no cop, J. Reed.
Right.
You a sellout.
Yeah. And that's what Jake was doing. They was in that market, Sakari them, the ancient Sakari, they was pinpointing niggas that made deals, and they was cutting niggas up in the market.
Yeah.
Like niggas with shanks in jail. They was causing commotions, and then they'll stab up the nigga they want to get, and then everybody just put their cloak up and just disappear. They was doing that to the Romans, and they was doing that to their own people. This was the controversy. You have to remember, at that point in time, our people were killed for the law.
Hey.
They was killing for the law. The same way Jake bang on each other, they was killing for the law, man. And anybody who stopped keeping the customs, they ain't care if you was an Israelite no more. You can't come home. This is why the Pharisees said, why is he sitting with publicans and sinners? It was still a people. They ain't call them heathens, they call them publicans and sinners. Why? Why would you call a heathen a sinner?
Right.
He didn't even have the law in the first place. This was the controversy. It was a family beef. And Gentiles being thrown around to diss the Israelites that didn't keep the customs. Because they was right down the street. Like Jake, who beef with 63rd and they from 64th. Jake was doing this with the laws, man. They was like, look, they don't get down like we get down. They don't keep the customs. Nigga walking around with a toga. I saw that nigga at the Temple of Diana. Man, them niggas is not real.
Hey, that's
Them niggas is not 100. That's how they was moving with the laws, man. They was broadening their phylacteries. They was getting all flesh, and they was bragging about being saved by the law, man. That's why Yahweh Shah was coming in like, look, nah. You got it.
This is 1 Maccabees 2, verse 14. It reads, Then Mattathias and his sons rent their clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn very sore. In the meanwhile, the king's officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city, molten to make them sacrifice. And when many of Israel came unto them, Mattathias also and his sons came together. Then answered the king's officers and said to Mattathias on this wise, Thou art a ruler, and honorable, and great man in the city, and strengthened with sons and brethren. Now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandments, like as all the heathen have done. Yeah, and the men of Judah also.
It said, as all the other heathen have done, because
Right.
you have to remember, Hellenization ain't just happened to us.
Right.
These niggas was global before
Yeah.
it was global.
Yeah.
They stepped in and they made all these. That's why so many nations had Greek as they tongue.
Yeah.
Because they ain't just do it to us, they did it to everybody. That's why he said, come, do like the other heathens did.
Yeah.
Fold, bend the knee.
Yeah.
And just like Jake say, hey, he a real one, he ain't snitch.
Yeah.
That's how we looked at men like him that said, look, I'd rather die than eat pork. That's how our people was moving in the ancient world.
Right.
So if you was a Jake that wasn't willing to go that far, our people that was in the land didn't look at you and respect you like an Israelite. That's why they threw around, man, that's a Gentile, man. That's a Hellenist.
Yeah.
He's a Hellenist. With his toga and his Princess of Diana. It was thrown around like that. You got it up.
It say, 1 Maccabees 2 and 18, it say, Now therefore, come first and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done, yeah, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain at Jerusalem, so that thou and thy house be in the number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children be honored with silver and gold and many rewards. That's Jake. Hey, give me Isaiah 28 and 15. That's Jake selling out, man. It said, verse 19, Then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice, Though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers and give consent to his commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the commandment of our fathers.
Right.
God forbade that we should forsake the law and the ordinances. We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, either on the right hand or on the left.
Because he said, look, the other nations, they left their laws, man. These other nations left their laws, statutes, and commandments and followed the Hellenization.
Generations that was set up for them, man. These devils deceived them, man. Hey, with gold and silver. It say, now when he had left speaking these words, then came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, which was at Modin according to the king's commandment.
Right.
Which thing when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his brains trembled, neither could he forbear to show his anger according to judgment, wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. Also the king's commissioners, who compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at that time, and the altar pulled he down.
And so he snapped.
He snapped.
He killed that Israelite that was doing the wicked sacrifices
And the
and
king's
those officers. And that's what started that campaign, where they were physically rebelling. But you still had our people who consented, like that Israelite that got put to death. He was with it.
Right.
A lot of Israelites was with it. They was like, man, this the new shit.
That's the,
All other nations that left their laws, we might as well.
It's the new trend. Let's get it.
Yeah, we might as well. Hey, TikTok. We might as well go ahead and join the club.
Right.
That was the mentality that a lot of our people had, and that's how they fell off and became Gentiles. Because remember, it said in Genesis the 49th chapter, until Shiloh come.
Right. Come.
And to him shall the gathering of the people be. You got it, huh?
It say, verse 26, thus dealt he zealously for the law of God, like Phineas.
Yeah, Phineas. When Phineas killed the guy with the javelin.
Right. And that's in Numbers 25.
Right.
It say, like as Phineas did unto Zimri, the son of Salom. And Methodeus cried, therefore, throughout the city with a loud voice, saying, whosoever is zealous of the law and maintain the covenant, let him follow me.
And that's how it started. That was the campaign. Now, when you fast forward to the time of Yahushua, he's coming in after the glory that the Maccabees had already obtained for what they did. So you still had the remnants of those who wanted to do the same thing.
Right.
They wanted to do a part two.
Yeah, right.
They're like, man, if they did it with the Greeks, we could do it with the Romans. That's why when you read Romans 13 chapter with Paul, why is he saying, look, you got to submit yourself to the higher powers? Because the mentality of Jake at that time was like, shit, if the Lord blessed Maccabees to do this, why we can't do it?
Yeah.
You had a lot of them like that. They were smuggling swords. This is why 70 AD happened. But it started long before that. I think it's like, what, like around 60, 62, 63, you start having these revolts. Where the land of Judea, they're sending letters to Rome like, look, these niggas getting out of pocket.
Yeah.
They killing our people in the markets. Soldiers doing patrols and they getting sliced up. That's why Titus and them had to come down, and they came down with that wrath because Jake was already provoking it. And Paul was writing letters to different provinces saying, look, you gotta chill. We gotta submit ourselves to the power. The Lord's gonna do this in due season. That's why you get 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter. Romans, the 13th chapter. The chapter in Peter's, where it talk about submitting yourself to those governors. Because at that time, we had to lay it down. A falling away had to happen. But you had Jake that resisted that ordinance. They wanted to fight. Then you had the ones who made deals with the devil and they wanted to keep their lifestyle. Like the Steve Harveys of this world. Shit, we in the suburbs. When you go into what the land of Judea looked like during that time, you actually had a suburbs where the rich Israelites would be at. With Caiaphas, guys like that who had influence. They had a neighborhood. Then you literally had the lower income. The lower income was in a different area. Then you had the temple. So even amongst Israel, there was this divide. That's what Yahushua entered into. He entered into a world where Jake was divided. The ones who wanted to beef, the ones who were zealous and killing for the law. All right, and then you had the ones who were making deals with the devil. And the average Jake had to maneuver through all of that. That's why Yahushua came in, and that's why his gospel was so different from all of that was coming in there. Because this was the gathering of the people through that ministry. You all did anything? No, we'll continue this next week.
Yeah.
We'll continue this next week because it's getting loud. You got anything?
Acts chapter 5, verse 36. 35, actually. And he said unto them, ye men of Israel, take heed to yourselves what ye intend to do as touching these men. For before these days rose up Theudius,
Right.
boasting himself to be somebody, to whom a number of men, about 400, joined themselves who were slain, and all as many as obeyed him were scattered and brought to naught.
You see? So these guys, this is spilling over from the Maccabees period, man. You got it.
After this man rose up Judas of Galilee,
Right.
in the days of taxes, and drew away much people after him.
Because they ain't want to pay taxes. That's why they ran up on Yahushua and said, look, who should we? They was trying to beguile him, man.
Yeah.
They was trying, because in their mind, they was like, man, why we got to pay tax? We the greatest people on the face of the earth. Why we got to pay taxes to the Romans? You got it.
After this man rose up Judas of Galilee in the days of taxes, and drew away much people after him. He also perished, and all, even as many as obeyed him, were dispersed. That was it on that. No, but if I may say this,
Yeah,
that's
go ahead.
why it's important to know the history,
Right.
in order to understand what's going on in the New Testament. Because like we was going into tonight, there were a lot of schisms that were going on that explain why Apostle Paul said there's no difference between Jew and Greek. You know, that's why that's how you understand the feud between the Sadducees and the Pharisees.
Right.
You understand what was going on during that Greek Empire, the Hellenization that happened to our people. Because, like the brother said, it's important to understand that you had men that was dying. For what we preaching for right now, they was dying for this. Eleazar is a prime example.
Right.
He wouldn't eat that pork.
Right.
And he said, please leave example to the young men to do wickedly, man.
Right.
And so you had men like Eleazar and other men like Julius Maccabees who was dying for this. Like
Right.
they was putting niggas to death for this shit.
Right.
And then you had men who were making agreements with the Romans. You had the high priest. They were going, and look, such and such, and Julius, he planned on doing this. Julius he's a threat to your kingdom. I think it was actually 2 Maccabees, the 8th chapter. Well, one of the men, the 15th chapter, he was like, man, Julius, he's a threat to your kingdom. If you don't take him down here, there'll be no peace to your kingdom.
Right.
When going into Nicomedes,
Right.
there'll be no peace in your kingdom if Julius is still alive. You had certain men of our people going to the Romans like, look, this nigga right here, he rebelling. You know, you need to get him out of your kingdom. Yeah. And so those men were few, you know, and you also had those of Sakari, all right, who was putting to death both the Romans and the Jews. Yeah. All right, you had a lot of sectors. Yeah. You know, you had a lot of things that factor into why our people were being called Gentiles in the New Testament.
And that's where you get these branches of like Pharisees, Zealots. Those were branches that came out of that Maccabean period. The ones who wanted to keep the fight going and the ones who wanted to be zealous for the law, but they also wanted to keep a structure so they could at least keep the laws and keep the people in the customs. So they was making deals, and some of them was sincere, but a lot of them was malicious. They was just trying to enrich themselves. Right. But this is one of the examples that the brother is going into. This is 2 Maccabees chapter 15 and verse 30. And Judas, who was ever the chief defender of the citizens, both in body and mind. So he was banging for the law, man. Yeah. And that translated into the time that Yahushua was walking into when he was born into that world, that divide.
Hey, yeah, going there.
Yeah, Khan. It says, and who continued his love toward his countrymen all his life, commanded to strike off Nicanor's head and his hand with his shoulder and bring them to Jerusalem.
Right. Now remember, and that's why I pulled my 1465 Bible out. Now I'm going to put up and show you. It got into the Maccabee period, and it's right between Malachi and Matthew. That's not an empty space, man.
Right.
The Apocrypha was between Malachi and Matthew. In my 1465 Bible, it talks about the Maccabean period, the revolt, and it got all the date because the brother mentioned 63, 64. It says 63, from 63 to like 168. It was going down, man. And it got in there, they say the 400 plus years. It's called 400 years of silence. It's in my book.
Right.
So read that.
Isaiah 28:10.
Now remember, 15. Isaiah is before the Apocrypha. Go ahead.
Isaiah 28:15. Because you have said we have made a covenant with death, and at hell we are in agreement. When the overflowing scourge shall pass through, it shall not come unto us. For we have made lies our refuge, and under falsehood have we hid ourselves.
This is what Jake been doing. Jake been selling out, making a covenant with these devils, man. They've been doing this, man. Like get Daniel 12 and 10.
Daniel 12 and 10.
Right.
Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand.
And that's why vocab alone is boxing. Hey, give me this precept and say, and it's in Isaiah when it say, you fighting against the maker. But that's what he's doing. Vocab is fighting against Yahweh Shema Bashar, man. He's fighting against Yahweh Shema Bashar. He don't even realize, but that's what he's doing. And now get 2 Peter 3 and 16. Right. Say it again.
Kicking against the prick.
Yeah, that's what he's doing. And this is what Peter said about Paul's letters. Because you ain't gonna understand these letters, man. And it's not for you. You got it.
This is 2 Peter chapter 3 and 16. Then remembered I the word of the Lord, how he said, Slug.
You got it? Go ahead and read that real quick.
Isaiah chapter 14.
Isaiah chapter 45, verse 9, woe unto him that striveth with his maker.
Right,
Let the potsherd strive with the potsherds of the earth.
right,
Shall the clay say to him that fashioned
right,
it, what makest thou?
right.
For thy work he hath no hands.
You coming against the Lord. Come on, what is this? What makest thou, Lord? Go ahead. That was it on that? Yeah, you fight against the Lord, man. Go ahead, you guys. Okay. So read that real quick, then you got it.
Come. This is 2 Peter chapter 3 and 16. As also in all his epistles, speaking in them of these things, in which are some things hard to be understood, which they that are unlearned and unstable rest, as they do also the other scriptures, unto their own destruction.
To your own destruction. You wrestling until your own destruction. Yeah, bro.
Now, why would Peter say that if the Christian version of Paul's letters is true? Why would Paul say that? Why would Paul say this is complicated? Why would he say that? Why would he say I have the ministry of reconciliation?
Right.
Because it goes back to this time of the Maccabees, during Hellenization, where by the punishment of death, a lot of our people went into these other customs. A lot of them willingly, and some of them unwillingly. And they had children, and eventually through the process of time, they became Hellenes or Hellenists. All right, because at that time, Greece was called Helen. That's what it was known as. That's why that word Gentile breaks down to that in many cases, man.
Hey, that's why in Hosea 8:8 it say, Israel is swallowed up. Now shall they be among the Gentiles as a vessel wherein is no pleasure, man. So living amongst these heathens is no good for us, man. It said we are living amongst the heathens, man. You got it.
I got an example of the type of treason that was going on within Israel. The type of men that you had going back into those times who were making agreements with the Romans, or the Grecians. Now, this is 2 Maccabees 14 and 3. It says, now one alchemist who had been high priest had defiled himself willfully in the times of their mingling with the Gentiles, seeing that by no means he could save himself, nor have any more access to the holy altar, came to King Demetrius in the 150th year, presenting unto him a crown of gold and a palm, and also of the boughs which were used solemnly in the temple. And so that day he held his peace. Howbeit, having gotten opportunity to further his foolish enterprise, and being called into council by Demetrius,
Sell out, nigga.
and asked how the Jews stood affected, and what they intended, he answered thereunto. Those are the Jews that he called Herodians, whose captain is Julius Maccabees, nourish war and are seditious, and will not let the rest be in peace.
Which I read in 1 Maccabees 2. Yeah, man. That's cold.
So you had the high priest going to the king and being like, look, those Herodians, man, after who's Judas they captain, they're not gonna let this empire be in peace. You know,
That's Mattathias' sons. We got to do something about them.
And at that point, they was basically bribing the king to be high priest.
Yeah.
One of them will put a bid in to be high priest, the other one will outbid him.
Right.
That's how defiled our people have become. Thirsty for power and wickedness.
Hey, what is that? John 11 when they said he gonna take away our seat.
Right, our place.
Yeah, man. You sell out ass niggas, man. You sell both niggas today, man. You same niggas that's in Hollywood. You same niggas that got the 501c3. It's the same guys, man. That's what the Lord say. Go to the highways and hedges. Ain't no building fund out here.
Right.
What nigga said, this how Mark the Messenger make his money. He said, the nigga said yesterday, he gotta pay bills. I gotta pay bills too. I don't got no ads on my videos. The Lord said by the sweat of your brow shall you eat bread.
Right.
You ain't sweating no fucking AC behind the keyboard. Get out of here with that garbage, man. These niggas is sellouts, man.
You got it, y'all. Get you close.
That nigga said he gotta pay bills too. I gotta pay bills too. We out here in the open, in the elements, where it's real at.
Right.
You can sit in front of a sign and make like you at the door and have a flame blowing like you outside. No, nigga, you in the studio. Go ahead.
Studio gangster.
Yeah, studio game.
With the
Yeah,
green
bro.
screen in the back.
Yeah, bro.
Outside.
See when the people nigga to my man, he outside, bro. No, that nigga ain't. That nigga ain't outside. Go ahead.
So Revelation 3 and verse 10. Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. Behold, I come quickly. Hold that fast which thou hast, and no man take thy crown.
And so with that, we want to give all praise, honor, and glory
To Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, Ba'ashem, Wabakadash.
Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasharallah, and a sincere salutation to all you Akim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Shalom. Wa abba babah.
While tuning in, may Yahweh Shema Shah continue to bless you in your houses. Stay prayed up. Go out for your precepts. Shalom.
Shalom.
Pa. Call Allah, Yahweh Shema Shah.
Beautiful.
Call Allah,